Up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman. Yes, it's Superman.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Bucket Think Tank for another round of Rapid Fire comic book review. So we're going to get into it with the conclusion of Peter Tomasi and Dan Jurgens' Superman in Action comics. We're going to do both of them in one big moment, because while they each have some other stories after the ones we're going to talk about, they don't really have the same impact as the rest of it. In other words, there's a bigger story going on that Tomasi and Jurgens are telling that sometimes intertwines, sometimes doesn't, and I want to focus on that. So let's start off with Tomasi's, because Tomasi's does sort of lead right into it. Or technically, now I think I may have gotten something mixed up when I tried to do the order. So, in Truth, Justice, and Family, the Kent family are packing up to leave Hamilton. And it's kind of touching because in a lot of ways it sort of parallels the first story, because it does end with them going to the county fair. And it's really cool to see them do that. And it's really just a touching story. Like, honestly, you didn't need the dialogue. And the dialogue's really good. I don't think Tomasi's ever turned out bad dialogue. But I think my favorite scene here is the scene of just Lois mopping the floor. You know, their tears running down her eyes. And you sort of realize that they've spent 12 years in this house. It's been 12 years, like, they raised John in this house. They've set up roots here. This is their home. They've gone through a lot together. I mean, what can one expect married to Superman? And I think it's just a hard thing in general. I remember when I moved, before we all left, I just took a nice walk through all the rooms and just sort of like remembered. It's a big deal. And John is still a bit nervous about moving, a whole new thing. He really liked living in Hamilton. You know, John went through a lot in just like 1 year in Hamilton. He got to see his dad be as Superman in a whole new light. He got to sort of step into the role of being Superboy with the expectation of being Superman. He had some of his ideas questioned. He unknowingly, or then doesn't remember the universe rebooting, or sort of retconning around two Supermen fusing together. You know, he met his first crush, Kathy. Love Kathy. Adorable cinnamon bun is Kathy. He met his best friend, Damien. You know, there's a lot set up in Hamilton that really could have gone a bit longer, but I think the move to Metropolis made more sense. In the same way that Gallifrey needs to return to its proper place in time and space. Doctor Who, Russell, do it. Do it, Russell. Put Gallifrey back, Russell. It's also important for the Kent family to be in Metropolis, where the sort of pulse of the world is happening. Like, if it happens in Metropolis, it's more likely to happen throughout the rest of the world. And the only person who seems a bit the most well-adjusted is Clark. And I think it's because Clark's been all around the world, around the universe. You know, change is a constant thing in his life. While Lois has sort of, like, as a military brat, yeah, she's moved around a bit, but, you know, she's never really had a place where she really took the same amount of roots and carved out this own particular niche of family, because Lois's family life is, well, yeah. But ultimately, that is it. I love that it ends at the fair, and there's been a threat, like something's happening, and the Justice League needs help. And in the first part of this story, way back at the first county fair, Lois is very sad, like, look, no hero, we're just gonna go out and be a family. This time, just sort of like embraces them, doing like, yeah, she takes their hats off, takes the glasses, go out and be heroes, and they go up, up, and away. It's a really great scene, and I loved it. Tomasi really brought the heart of the DC Universe, and he did the same thing when he did Batman and Robin. If you ever felt like there was like an emotional center of the DC Universe, look for Peter Tomasi's name. I kind of want him to do JSA. Like, look, Jeff Johns clearly is not going to write the JSA in any way that would make most people who like the JSA, or even Jeff Johns, happy, because he clearly only wants to be there on his time. Give it to Tomasi. Put Tomasi on JSA. Should he be doing Justice League? Probably. But right now, everybody and their grandma is on a list to do Justice League. We need someone with taste, panache, and a respect for the source material who understands the JSA. I think Tomasi's your guy. Is it sort of beneath him? Yeah, I think he should be doing Justice League. At least give him a Justice League run. I think a nice sort of emotional team-focused story to the Justice League. Actually, he could do a really good JLA. Oh, that'd be so cool. Like, different stories with sort of like a wider Justice League. Oh, that'd be so good. That'd be so good. Anyway. Now comes to Dan Jurgens' Action Comics, Aftermath, and Booster Shot. So, this story is kind of Superman at his dumbest, but there's a really nice theme about family, about reconnecting, and about making up for lost time. In a lot of ways, that's kind of what Jurgens' story is. And he does end it in a beautiful way. So, Action Comics really sort of goes into Clark's head. And I think there's a distinct difference between where Superman under Peter Tomasi is really about Superman, John, and Lois. You know, as this family unit, Action Comics really sort of splits them apart a bit. The story of Tomasi's Superman is really about Superman, or Clark and Lois, raising John. That's really it. John is sort of the focus of that book. Pretty much every story goes back to them or them as a family. Action Comics is really about Clark and Lois. I mean, I think it really is. Featuring John Kent. It's sort of like a nice reverse. So, after the events of the Oz Effect, Superman is pretty shaken up, doesn't quite know what to believe anymore. And he's trying to figure it out. He's checking Kellex for any information. He goes down to Oa to check with the Green Lanterns. And going on to Bendis' Superman, this irks me even more. So, Superman has a problem. And it's a problem involving space. So he goes to the Green Lanterns, the space police, Figure there's a problem, you go to them. And ignoring the fact that he doesn't get the information looking for, he does find some clues, some help, in the fact that someone seems to have tampered with a recording of the destruction of Krypton. In Bendis' Superman, and I mentioned this when I reviewed the book, because it made no sense, if Clark is worried that his wife and son are lost somewhere in space because the communicator he had is broken, then it would make sense for him to ask his friend, the space cop, not just like a low-level friend of the space police. No, let's point out that he is friends with every Earth Lantern at this time. Ignoring Joe Mulane, who he hasn't met yet, he is friends with Simon Baz, Jessica Cruz, Kyle Rayner, Guy Gardner, Jon Stewart, Hal Jordan, and, if need be, Alan Scott. And, if you want to be fancy, Jade. Alright? So he's friends with 8 Green Lanterns. Alright? And 4 of them, 4 to 5 of them, are key members of the Green Lantern Corps. One of them, Jon Stewart, and 2, if you count Hal, have been, or are, leaders of the Green Lantern Corps. Alright? If Superman, someone who has saved not just the Earth, but the universe, would like to call for like a little favor trying to find his lost family, they'd be like, yeah, sure, man, sure. What did it look like? Where the last scene? There we go. They'd have found him. But no. Bendis is set on making Superman look stupid. Now we've gone off that tangent. With that in mind, Superman decides, well, if the answer lies in the past, someone's been messing with time, I have to go back to Krypton. Instead of just going back to the future. I do love that movie. Meanwhile, there is another story, which is Lois finding out about her father, General Sam Lane, who's been captured in the corrupt government of Lombardo. And it's revealed to us that Lois and Sam haven't spoken in years. Basically because Lois had an op-ed exposing government effectively working with corrupt governments, which in other words, Lois just revealed that the U.S. was being the U.S. But, Sam Lane, you don't call out the government, you don't call out the military, whatever. So he's been captured, the mission that he was on went under, and he's more likely to be executed, and the U.S. government's not been doing anything about it. So these two stories are sort of parallel each other. As Clark goes on a mission to the past to understand his father, Lois goes on a mission in the present to save her father, and try to reconnect, try to establish a connection with those two things. The difference is, though, Lois's mission was undoubtedly the safest one, but had the worst end result. But anyway, Clark's little tribute trick to the past, using the Flash's cosmic treadmill, because of course it's a cosmic treadmill, is partially stopped by Booster Gold. Booster Gold being a time traveler and superhero from, I believe, the 25th century. I could be wrong about the century. He's here to stop Superman because, well, you can't go messing around with the past, let alone something as important as the destruction of Krypton. The universe sort of turns, or at least key moments in the universe sort of turn on the destruction of Krypton, namely the safety of Earth, because Superman's there. You know, the web of time. Anyway, so this leads to your standard time travel shenanigans, and Clark goes through a bit of an emotional roller coaster. Not only is he on Krypton, he'll see his father working with General Zod. His actions there will apparently lead to one or two things changing, especially because their actions they sort of fracture time, and we create a little parallel time that Clark gets to see where, if they'd listen to Jor-El, if they get off the planet, Krypton's established somewhere else, by default Kal-El grows up, has a family, has his own kids. Clark watches that happen, he has to leave that behind. Because the longer people like him and Booster Gold stay there, this sort of fractured timeline will attempt to garner a foothold and solidify and become the new continuity. In other words, by staying there, Clark may effectively erase Lois and John from existing. Like, there's no telling what could happen.
It's timey-wimey thing.
Timey what? Timey-wimey?
I've no idea where he picks that stuff up.
But the problem is, a bunch of other shenanigans happen from this. They end up in the 25th century, where we get a nice look into Booster Gold's life, what kind of hero he wants to be, his dad. It's interesting the dads play a big role here, too, because Booster Gold's dad, Lois's dad, Kal-El's dad. And, of course, later we'll go to a point far in the future where Zod has taken over planet, and we'll meet Lore, and you see his relationship with his dad. And another fun thing about that is that, despite the fact, by default, Zod wants to throw hands with Superman, he's also, he and Ursa also want revenge because Superman trapped them in the Phantom Zone, ruined their life, deprived them of time they could have spent as a family. Like, the Phantom Zone does more harm than good, ultimately. Sure, there probably are beings that are too dangerous. Like, say, Doomsday should be in the Phantom Zone. Alright, like, just lock him in there. Because he's a creature bred purely for destruction. He will not stop. He has no real emotional ties, like anything that really connects him to what we would call a sense of humanity. It would essentially be the same as trapping the Daleks or the Cybermen there. That whole issue of family and making up for lost time is the big theme there. And when Clark comes back, and after Lois is able to save her dad, it's a really interesting story watching Lois save her dad. It's really mostly spending time inside Lois's head. She's a bit frustrated that John is there, but she's like, okay, he's half Kryptonian. He technically is safer here than I am. But it should be noted that Lois has other time to make up with because, well, she never told Sam about John. Never even told John about Sam. So there's a whole other part of her family that John and Sam never got to know about. Also because Sam Lane hates Superman. Well, hate may be a strong... He distrusts Superman. He's not like General Thunderbolt Ross, who hates his son-in-law, Bruce Banner, and has legitimately made attempts to kill him. So at the end of the story, after finding out that, hey, at some point in the future, Zod will have his own planet, his own quote-unquote Kryptonian empire, which we'll see get started in the pages of Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps. Really good book. One of the best DC Rebirth books. When it's all said and done, when the dust is settled, when Lois saves her dad, and Superman and Booster return to the present day, and hopefully have not totally messed up the space-time continuum by creating a bunch of
Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey.
We then go to this really nice, sort of quiet moment, a little family drama, because what's the point of a good story if there's no family drama? Lois is preparing dinner, because, Sam Lane's coming home, nice little family dinner. Sam gets to properly meet his grandson. Sam's gonna they're gonna try to avoid the awkwardness, avoid the issues that really divide Sam and Lois. Clark, meanwhile, like every son-in-law, is off doing something else. He's helping out Star Labs. He'll be back, but, if there's any chance he can avoid this as long as possible, because, his father lost his secret identity. And I don't think he respects Clark anyway. But he sort of thinks about what has happened. You know, the issues with the Phantom Zone, how angry Zod and Ursa were, and by default, Lore. He thinks maybe the Phantom Zone isn't appropriate for every threat just because they're a bit too strong or a bit too dangerous. Maybe they need some help. Now, granted, Zod will not stop. You know, what if we gave Zod like his own plan? Like, look, Zod, just don't invade people, and we'll be fine. All right, just don't pull a Mongol, and create like War World or be like Sinestro. Just have a planet where everyone's cool, and go from there, and we'll be fine. I'm sure we could talk to Zod about that. Probably won't last, but whatever. Clark decides to, like, hey, I think there's someone in the Phantom Zone that doesn't need to be there. They just need some help. So he digs up from the Phantom Zone Hank Henshaw, a.k.a. Cyborg Superman, whose real motivation is just he lost his family. Like, he like, his wife and children died, he had a mental breakdown, and he became this horrible monstrosity, aka Cyborg Superman. And maybe what he just needs is time to really grieve and process it. In other words, he's trying to stop Injustice Superman from happening. So, Superman, I never quite figured out if I want to call him Clark or Superman. Superman, I guess, yeah, whatever. Superman comes in, and he pulls Cyborg Superman out and says, hey, look, this whole thing I designed is made of super strong space material, alright? Like, this stuff here, even I would have trouble breaking through it. Alright? Now, while you're here, I'm going to put you in, like, this little medically induced coma, alright? You can be trapped in an illusionary world where you get to hang out with your family. Alright? Sound good? Sound good? Sounds kind of dark, but, you know, we're trying. We're trying. It's not the darkest thing done here. And so he really helps Hank Henshaw sort of reunite in some form with his family. And then we cut to the drama at Lois's, at the Kent family apartment. And yeah, Lois and Sam are having a bit of an argument. Namely, they're finally airing out the grievances, what led to them really sort of drifting apart. Lois's article, basically, you know, calling out the U.S. government, holding it to account. Lois says, like, yeah, powerful groups need to be held accountable, and then bringing the fact that, you know, this is also about your distrust of Superman. And it's sort of interesting that Lois has said, like, hey, yeah, people need to be held accountable, no one should be above suspicion, but she doesn't hold that for Superman. We know why she doesn't hold it for Superman. In part because she knows him personally. Alright? Even if you take out the fact that not only is she boning him, she's married to him, they have a child together, she trusts Superman. Actually, she trusts Clark. I think she trusts Clark. And that's the problem. There's this bit of bias. That's one of the reasons why Superman revealing himself as Clark Kent made no sense, because by default, everyone knows he's married to Lois Lane. Lois Lane can never write a story about Superman. She's writing about her husband. All right? There's no sort of, you know, journalistic integrity there. There's no doubt that she could or couldn't be biased. And the question is that she's always known. Lois could really risk losing her Pulitzer for that. But Sam Lane's argument is that he doesn't trust Superman because he doesn't know anything about him. He doesn't know where he comes from, doesn't know where his people are. Superman is not accountable to anyone. And so, they need to be ready. Lois says, like, look, absolute power corrupts absolutely, but you can't apply that to Superman. I'm like, you totally can. You totally should. And I know Superman, alright? I trust this guy, unless Lois dies. But even then, he and no other superhero should be immune to scrutiny. And Lois has just made that personal exception, and then that whole thing sort of devolves, and Sam's about to walk out. Luckily, here comes Clark. Like, hey, and Clark sort of fixes the day. Like, you know, the problem is you two have always been like this. You're too much alike. You're both stubborn. You're both principled, and what that means is you'll both break before you bend. All right? Like, neither of you will concede the ground, even though you both make good points. And he says, this is in part my fault, because I always tried to stay out of it. Maybe I need to be more involved, especially now that we have a son. So he's like, you know what, let's just start over. Let's reintroduce ourselves. He introduces Sam to his daughter Lois. He reintroduces Lois to General Lane. And he reintroduces General Lane to his grandson, John Kent. And everyone's like, yeah, great, hug it out. And that's how the comic ends. Jurgens is Action Comics had a surprising amount of heart. I think there's one issue I don't quite get, and that he doesn't quite resolve the whole Mister Oz thing. Like, we don't quite reveal who took Mister Oz out of time. Remember, the general consensus is Dr. Manhattan. That was never quite directly brought up to Superman. Like, he'll find out about Dr. Manhattan in the events of Doomsday Clock. But Superman never makes that connection, that the giant blue naked man is the one that took his father away from Krypton and dropped him on Earth, and then took him away again. That's sort of where, like, a little bit where it starts to fall apart. And I'm not quite sure if that happened in part because Jurgens was taken off Jurgens either was taken off or left Action Comics. I'm not quite sure what happened, but Bendis came and took over, so who knows? Or if something else was going on. I think around that time we sort of saw DC Rebirth start to crack a bit. You know, Tom King's Batman started to reveal its problems. The Green Lanterns with Sam Humphries, well, actually, there was a new writer after Sam Humphries. That book sort of came to an end. Whatever Justice League Dark and Wonder Woman were building to... Actually, Wonder Woman was never building up to anything involving Doomsday Clock. That is the weirdest thing. Wow, I just now realized that. Yeah, you just sort of like realized, like, hey, this was thought out pretty well, but it started to fumble apart. Like Doomsday Clock got delayed. The events of Dark Knight's Metal and later Death Metal was sort of upped in its importance. Justice League was starting to crumble a bit too. Brian Hitch's Justice League is like, eh. But yeah, but with Jurgens wanted to really bring the action to Action Comics. We saw fights with Doomsday, with Revenge Squad, with Mxyzptlk, with Cyborg Superman, with time travel, and a bunch of other fun things. We saw Lex on Apocalypse, and that was crazy. We saw him on Apocalypse again in Superman. But what you really sort of get is Clark trying to make sense of his life. The things that make sense, the things that don't make sense, his family life, his continuity, his relationship with Lex Luthor and how that deteriorated. All that was really fun stuff. It really was about the Superman of Metropolis, as opposed to Superman by Tomasi being more Clark Kent. Clark Kent as Superman. Where I think Action Comics is Superman as Clark Kent. At least, sort of it. It's a real shame that this was not the template for stories going forward for Action Comics and Superman. Because as much as I love Philip Kennedy Johnson's work, it doesn't quite hit the same, which it wasn't obligated to. The real problem is, of course, what came before PKJ and after Jurgens and Tomasi. And it was Bendis. And I'll say it like this, Bendis systematically destroyed the Superman family. It's still intact, like they're still there, but the rapport isn't there, the level of trust isn't there. You sort of get the feeling that these people are really in it for themselves. And that didn't feel like the family. Aging up John Kent fundamentally changed that dynamic. It ruined the dynamic he had with other characters. And it's a bit sad. Well, not just a bit, it's pretty sad. And now we have Tom Taylor's Superman. And as I've said before, it is not Taylor's fault. The Superman he has to work with, being John Kent. It is, however, his fault how he chooses to tell that story. Whether you like it or not, I'm sure, and there are some things that I do like in that story, just not enough to keep me from going, I can't read this anymore. Ultimately, Jurgens and Tomasi, like I said, did a great job of being the heart of DC Rebirth. Like, everything good about it is in Jurgens and Tomasi's hands. Well, anyway, enough of me giving those two tongue baths. So this was it. I think this is what, our fourth Action Comic Run Talk? We have another one's planned. We're actually reading it now. This one's pretty special because of what's been happening in the past week. I think it's time. I think it's time we really talked about this particular story, this particular run, because it's. I realize how important it is to me in the past year, and again, the events of this week have really hammered home past couple of weeks have really hammered home exactly how important this story is to me. So yeah, we're going to leave this here. If you're new to the Bucket Think Tank, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. Check out some of my videos, and I'll catch you all later. This is Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching. As always, may your fandom serve you well.